Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, thank you. Welcome to the Asian American Writers Workshop. If this is your first time here, my name is Hamad Sadek. I'm the programs manager at the workshop. We are a nonprofit organization that's been operating for about 33 years. And since its inception, the workshop's goal has been to amplify the writings of Asian Americans from what we say is a radically inclusive ethos. What that means is we like to expand the definition of not only what it means to be an Asian American, but also what it means to be a writer. And that means amplifying all sorts of Asian American writing, especially short fiction, which we are here to celebrate. Can I get a round of applause for our writers? Just a couple of housekeeping remarks before we begin. We have 2 gender-neutral bathrooms right over there if you need it. If you need to step back, step out for a conversation on the phone or what have you, there's a back room over there. It's also the Mina Alexander reading room. Mina Alexander was kind enough to donate her library to us after her passing, and we celebrate some of her texts back there. Highly recommend that you go take a look when you can. And then most importantly, masking is required. Our programs coordinator will be walking around to hand everyone a mask who doesn't have one. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your understanding. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the people who will be speaking today. We'll be reading and speaking. First, our 2 readers. Puloma Ghosh is a fiction writer based in Chicago whose work has appeared in One Story, Craft Literary, Putleaf, and other publications. Mouth is her first book. It is in the back for purchase after the reading, so please make sure you go and support Puloma. Aruni Kashyap is the author of The Way You Want to Be Loved, the novels The House with 1,000 Stories, and How to Date a Fanatic. Along with editing a collection of stories called How to Tell the Story of an Insurgency, he translated 2 novels from Assamese to English, published by Zuban Books and Penguin Random House. He's the recipient of a Harvard Radcliffe Fellowship and a number of other very impressive accolades. He is an associate professor of English and creative writing and the director of the creative writing program at the University of Georgia, Athens. Go Dogs. I didn't expect that, I know. Go Dogs. And then our moderator for the evening is Nur Nasreen Ibrahim, a journalist, television producer, and writer from Lahore, Pakistan. Her speculative fiction, literary fiction, and personal essays have been published by the Aleph Review, Salmagundi, and Barrel House, and anthologized in collections from Harper Perennial, Catapult, and Platypus Press. Nur is a recipient of the 2021-2023 Lighthouse Writers Workshop Book Project Teaching Fellowship and the AAWW Martis Fellowship. To start, I'd like to bring up Puloma Ghosh.
Sit, I can hold my book. Okay. I am going to read the beginning of the first story in the collection called Desiccation. Ma wanted me to befriend the only other Indian girl at our skating rink because Ma knew the rest of the girls didn't like me. She imagined Mitha and I would be fast friends just because we looked more like each other than we did everyone else. I now think Ma only wanted another mother to commiserate with, one who didn't ignore her while she sat in the stands during competitions wearing her ridiculous puffy coat. Someone from her own country might have been more sympathetic to the choices Ma made, less fearful of the person she'd become. My mother had been alone for a long time, ever since they took my father with all the men years ago. I'm sure she had friends once, but I hardly remember a time before she took the job at the bureau and everyone in town stopped speaking to her. At that age, I thought my aloneness was a choice, a badge of individuality, but my mother knew it was a consequence of her own choices, and that's probably why it bothered her to see me stretch alone. The night before the winter competition, Ma and I made our weekly trip to the shop. She handed me a can and said, "Just talk to her, Meghna. You'll find that you have a lot in common." I didn't know how to explain to her that Pritha didn't strike me as descended from any nationality. The only adult I'd ever seen her with was her coach. Pritha had a singularity that felt like it couldn't have an origin. I was fairly certain she wasn't even human. To avoid answering, I rearranged the items in our cart. Cans at the bottom, boxes up top. "She wants to talk to you, I can tell," Ma insisted. "She's always watching you." I didn't find this comforting. Pritha was pale, slim, and lithe. Everything about her had precision but no warmth. She rocked smoothly from the inside of her blade to the outside, her body a sail against the wind. She was terrifying when she competed, waxy cheeks split by an uncanny lipstick smile. She always won gold, as though the judges were afraid to give her anything less, and I was always stuck a step below with silver. Pritha never smiled on the podium. In all the pictures that lined the rink's office during the past 3 years that she'd lived here, she stood expressionless. I think we must have been the same age, but beside her, with my toothy white grin, I looked like a child. I expected the winter competition to be like all the others, with me and her taking first and second. There were only a handful of other girls in town who competed year after year, and of them, we were the best. Tiny and aerodynamic, equally hardworking, she and I had the most ice time booked each week and flew through our jumps like gravity was nothing. By the time I got to high school, the other girls were more concerned with competing with one another and ignored us for the most part. But mid-routine that day, I couldn't help but remember my mother's words. I thought of Pritha's gaze for only a split second, a crucial mistake, as I twisted over my left shoulder to prepare for a double axel, the most difficult element in my program. I shifted my weight to my left foot, swinging my right and using that motion to launch into the air. I closed my eyes and the rink went black. Cold air cupped my cheeks, my molars pressed neatly together in the back of my mouth. My body, which had been clenched tight, unwound after my second rotation, knowing from hours of practice where and when to spring open and catch the ice back on my blade. On landing, I saw Pritha there, her face stark white like a summoned ghost against the shadowed risers, clear as if she was standing on the ice with me. The music continued, but I couldn't move, numbed by her fixed look. My ankle gave out, and I slid across the rink, at the mercy of my own momentum. When I looked up, my coach was hurrying across the ice toward me, and Pritha was gone, buried once more in the crowd. I had seen corpses, which is why I knew Pritha was not alive. Baba did autopsies before the Bureau relocated him to who knows where when I was 7. In middle school, I started snooping around his things. After Ma went to sleep, I often snuck into his old study and opened drawers, peeking into folders of coroner's reports. One day, I turned on his computer. His passwords were easy, my birthday or Ma's. I scrolled through the photographs he left behind. Women and men naked on steel tables, sutures across their chests. Crime scenes dotted with yellow tabs and a body gleaming under the flash like fresh ice. Pritha looked like she had climbed out of one of those photographs and pulled on a skating dress. Her face was blank, her flesh appeared hard and painted. In a locker room full of teenage girls, she was a plastic ball hidden poorly in a bowl of ripe plums. When she walked past, a morgue-like chill raised goosebumps on my skin. I've always loved cold things. The hum of popsicles against my teeth, the chlorine sting of pool water. Whenever my parents took me skating as a child, I would lie face down on the ice in a tantrum at the end of public skating, partially because I didn't want to leave, and partially because I liked the way the cold against my cheek turned into pain and then nothing. Ma said it was Baba's idea to start me with a coach, but I think this was a lie to make me love someone I barely remembered. Sometimes it felt like I missed him, but I was never sure if what I missed was really him or a father fabricated from the ones I'd seen on TV. And maybe it was because he was so unreal to me, so absent from even the places in that house that were once his, that I could find my darkest appetite in that study. I touched myself for the first time there, photographs wallpapering the monitor. The softness of flesh against metal made me want to tense every muscle I had. Eyes open, lips parted, the bodies looked enraptured. They convinced me that death was akin to ecstasy, and imitating their contorted poses on the high-backed chair, I came. Ma drove me to the clinic after the fall, my ankle wrapped in ice. On the way, we passed our house, then our neighbor Gabriel's. I noticed his driveway was still empty. I turned to my mother's tired profile. For many years, she'd been enforcing the draft in our county. Our town called her the collector, as though were the one who kept the men shut away somewhere. Each time a boy turned 17, she had to escort him to the bureau. After that, we never saw him again. If he tried to dodge, she'd disappear for hours, sometimes days, in pursuit. She always found him. Did you turn in Gabriel? I asked her, even though it was a morbid question that would only make both of us feel bad. My raised foot, signaling weeks of skate-free boredom, had put me in a shitty mood. No, she replied, her eyes on the road. Where is he? I don't know yet. Yet. No wonder Ma was in a shitty mood too. They don't have to take everyone, do they? What happens if you let him go? She sighed. Nothing good. Are you going to leave soon to look for him? Ma didn't answer, and I was afraid to ask again. I liked Gabriel. We had been neighbors for as long as I could remember, and he was the only friend I had at the rink. He drove me to practice sometimes when Ma was gone. He had dark curls that writhed with their own life when he skated. Whenever he jumped, his clenched teeth left neat dimples by the sharp part of his jaw. He was the closest thing I'd seen to a man since I was a child. One morning, a month before the winter competition, we sat in his truck, waiting for the coaches to unlock the doors. It was still dark out. I had seen him become more sullen over the past few months because he no longer had anyone to compete against. Just shy of 17, he was the last remaining boy at our rink, and it was almost time. I touched his jaw, and he turned to me. You're so lucky, Meg. You can be anything. You can skate forever. I shook my head. There is no forever. Nobody knows what the Bureau has planned. He turned off his headlights and kissed me. We grasped for each other between the seats, and I bruised my pelvis on the stick shift. I shoved my hand into his pants, and he turned hard, so jarringly warm in the cool dawn. He came quick and sticky in my palm. As we searched for napkins, I saw Pritha standing at the door to the rink. I don't know how long she had been watching, but her white face made me shiver. Gabriel wiped my hand gently, not noticing her. I kept my eyes on Pritha until her coach arrived, and when I stepped out of the car, I was so wet my knees quivered. 2 weeks later, Gabriel stopped coming to the rink. Is that time? Should I keep going? All right, I'll keep going. This is what we were told in school. There's a war going on, unlike any that preceded it. 8 years ago, things became so dire they conscripted all the men in the country for a top secret purpose. There were no battles we could see, no bloodshed on soil. Nobody could be trusted to know what was going on because we were surrounded by leaky technology that could see, hear, touch, read. Shortly after, they switched all communications to local, mobile devices bricked, internet access restricted to nearby servers, all packages and shipments thoroughly regulated, landlines hitting an apologetic operator when people tried to dial outside of their area codes. Our world shrank, but after the initial shock and a few transitional years, most people in our town became comfortable. If there was unrest anywhere, we couldn't see it. Some even argued things became better for women, as the world was seldom good to them before, but that might have been propaganda fed to us by the Bureau. Even as a child, I wondered what was good about being left behind. We entertained ourselves with hobbies, competitions, books, and movies. I was lucky that my town had a well-established skating rink before things fell apart. I twirled and twirled around the rink every day until I ached too much to think, but to say I could be anything was a stretch. I tried to ask Mom many times where they took the men, but she always said she didn't know. I only came to believe her when I missed school after the injury. Lying on the couch during one of those days, I heard Ma in the kitchen. Her voice carried through the heating ducts and hissed perfectly out the radiator. He's only a boy, she whispered, and I knew she meant Gabriel. What will you do with him? I was surprised to hear her ask this question outright. She never showed mercy or resistance. That was why everyone hated her so much. When parents cried and begged, she didn't flinch. But I thought of my mother smoothing bandages over Gabriel's elbows when we got little scrapes on the rink, when she gave him piano lessons in our living room. I felt so sad for her all of a sudden. I could tell from the silence that she didn't get an answer. The bureau never gave answers. The phone hit the table with a clatter and her breathing became shallow. I turned on the television so I wouldn't have to hear her cry. I thought about Pritha instead. My gut told me if I hadn't met her eyes, I would have landed the jump like any other. I still went to the rink for conditioning while I healed. For days, I talked to no one but my coach, and it felt awful when I couldn't skate to keep busy. I came to terms with the fact that Gabriel was not coming back, leaving me friendless. I was alone in the locker room, feeling sorry for myself one day when Pritha came in and sat down. She shuffled around in her bag for her lace puller and untied one skate. While she tightened it, I asked, "Was it you?" She looked up. "Did you make me fall?" "It's beautiful," she tilted her head, "the way you fall." That's not how the judges felt. When you touch the ice, you come alive, like you want it to hold you. I had no idea what to say to that. The squeak of laces against leather echoed between us. "Where are you from?" I asked at last, in an attempt to appease my mother's hopes. She smiled. "Far away." While I sat in silence, perplexed by her vague answer, she tied a knot, dropped the puller back into her bag, and left the locker room. I felt oddly relieved. I loved how little I knew about Pritha, how strangely she spoke. She didn't go to my school, and I didn't know where she lived. At the rink, we assumed she was homeschooled, but we were all too afraid of her to ask. She was just teeth and flesh and empty eyes, no different from a body on a slab. In February, a rat infestation emerged in the neighborhood. We were told to keep our snacks in airtight containers, no bags or chewable wrappers or loose fruit in the locker room. The custodian stuck her broom into every corner of the rink, searching for vermin, but found nothing. A few days later, she discovered a pile of half-chewed rat corpses by the rink's dumpster. "We must have cats," she told the concerned mothers. One morning, as I paced around the rink with no Gabriel to kiss before the doors unlocked, I found Pritha, crouched against the building's gray wall, her teeth deep in a crumpled rodent. I turned the corner before she saw me. A few weeks later, the rat problem was under control, and I realized I hadn't seen a single cat outdoors, stray or collared, for many months. Not long after, Pritha and I were alone in the locker room as we changed after practice. She finished early, having landed every jump perfectly, and I was still easing back into my regular routine. I noticed a scar between her neck and shoulder, pink and round, like teeth. I asked her where it was from. "A tiger bit me long ago." "Tigers are extinct, I said. "They are now," she replied. I stood up and walked toward her as she pulled a sweatshirt from her locker. "Like this?" I sank my teeth into her scar, pressing them into the discolored skin. She sighed and rolled her head back. Yes, just like that." I bit and sucked and ran my tongue along the hard, salty muscle. I pulled away with a wet sound. She exhaled and put her sweatshirt on. She left without another word, but I wish she had stayed and touched me. I loved how cold she was against my mouth. I'll stop there.
Thank you. One more time. Right. Fiddling and tantalizing. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring up Aruni Kashyap, our hero.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Asian American Writers Workshop, Liha, Mohammed, for all the work that you have put in to organize this event. It has been so well organized. I have only good things to say. Mohammed, when you actually mentioned Mina Alexander, it made me very nostalgic because Mina Alexander was part of the SARC, which was one of the earliest organizations in South Asia only for writers. And one of my teachers, Indira Goswami, was a very integral part of that. And she used to always encourage younger writers to come and read there. So the SARC used to get all the very senior writers, veteran writers, and have readings in Delhi, Bombay, Colombo, like that. But a lot of these writers were also very senior, and when they started, they were great writers, but when they started reading, they wouldn't stop. They're not like Puloma. They would go on for an hour and a half, and then if you ask them to leave or leave a chick, they get very, very offended. But in one of those readings in India Habitat Center, Delhi, Indira Goswami said, Aruni, you come and read your poems. And I was waiting there. And then, because all these senior writers, mostly men, by the way, they're all in their 70s, they took up all the time, and there was no time for others to read. And then the organizer said, only Indira Goswami will read because we have half an hour, and others have no, like I was the last person, and she said, she went up the stage and said, I give my time to Aruni, I don't want to read. And I read. And then it was the same place where actually Beena Alexander read, who didn't take much time. But it made, and Kishore Nahid from Pakistan was reading, who is an amazing, amazing poet. And I listened to her poetry for the first time, and my experience with hair raising was so phenomenal. And she was reading from memory. That was the first time I read with Meena, Alexander, Kishore Nahid. I felt that I'm a writer. So when you read Meena Alexander's name and told that this library is, I felt very nostalgic and almost emotional. And her poem, actually, House of a Thousand Doors, was the inspiration for me to write a poem called The House with a Thousand Novels, which eventually was borrowed and became the title of my own novel. I mean, I modified it over the years, but I remember that poem spoke to me so beautifully. So, big respect and love to Meena Alexander if she's listening to this. I want to start reading from my first short story called Skylar Girl. For various reasons, it is one of my favorite stories. It is a folk tale, but the folk tale is sandwiched between a more contemporary story. The folk tale is about this girl who refuses to die. She has a stepmother who treats her very horribly. And one day her stepmother kills her but fails to kill her. And every time she is buried in different places, she emerges as a tree or a plant in different ways, actually. It's about the resilience of of somebody who refuses to give up, refuses to die, refuses and continues to live and in different forms. But at the same time, the story is very big in Assam, and because many Assamese writers have retold it repeatedly, because they also think the mistreatment of the stepmother is very akin to the mistreatment by the federal government of India. So there are numerous retellings of it, and different endings and different contemporary settings, and so on. The story is called Skylar Girl. I made some modification, of course, in my retelling. From this distance, the students sounded like birds chirping. They looked carefree, but they had been busy earlier that day, sprinting across the campus for classes and lectures well into the evening. Often their clothes were crumpled, and the men had week-long stubbles. Yet their eyes were still bright, and their young faces glistened. In the evening, a light breeze cooled the campus. Students flocked to the local dhaba or a Chinese takeaway for a quick cup of tea, a snack, a late lunch. The trees on the perimeter of the university's 50 acres were no more than 6 feet tall, announcing that they were planted less than a year ago. That the university was new and was trying to make its presence felt for conferences such as the one Sanjeev was here to attend. Last night, when he had arrived, driven by a university-employed driver in a Toyota Innova, it was midnight, but many students were still roaming the grounds. As he took charge of his room at the guest house, Sanjay missed his undergraduate days. He couldn't believe that was almost 15 years ago. It was around 11 now. He had spent the day attending panels on Indian literature, Dalit literature, literature from Northeast India, and now he was unable to sleep. The well-lit campus provided no privacy, even at night. He found a concrete bench to sit on, rather right under a tall lamp. They run on solar power. The chief organizer of the conference, a middle-aged man in a black kurta, had told them during the Northeast team lunch. Naga and Assamese dishes. Sitting on the concrete bench, Sanjeev read aloud the story he had selected for his session the next afternoon. It felt odd, but he had to read the English translation rather than his own Assamese language writing. His English had a thick accent. He halted. How would he tackle questions from the audience? As an undergraduate, he had studied chemistry, but by the time he took his final year exam, Sanjeev had had enough of farty smells in labs. He decided to enroll in a master's program in Assamese literature. It was a new lease of life. He started writing again and gathered a loyal list of readers for the poems and stories that were published on the department's wall magazine. By the end of his first year, he had not only made it to several mainstream print magazines, but was also elected as the university's magazine editor. It was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to him. But his mother disagreed. She thought this was the most amazing thing to happen to him. This invitation to read at an international conference. For his mother, Delhi was very far. Delhi meant the army that committed atrocities on the villages in the 90s. Delhi was for rich people. Its universities were first class. Delhi was a stepmother who treated the people of Assam poorly. That one of those places in Delhi had recognized her son's caliber and invited him to participate in this all-expenses paid conference was his life's greatest achievement, he felt. To confirm his participation, he had to email them a draft of one of his stories, translated into English. He cycled 6 miles in search of a shop with a computer plugged to an internet connection. Because even though there were nearly 5 major mobile phone companies competing for attention with free data and unlimited talk time, none of them worked properly in his village. At first, he requested a friend's mother, a professor at the local college, for help in the translation, but she was too scared to agree. She said that after teaching Keats and Eliot and Shakespeare for 25 years in Assamese to students in English honors who didn't understand English, she didn't have the confidence to translate his story to English. This was a big thing, as a matter of great prestige for the town, so she would connect him with someone at Cotton College State University who would be happy to translate it. The 4 best stories from the conference would be published in an international anthology, which would be an incentive for this ambitious young colleague of hers. 3 weeks after he received the letter, Sanjeev traveled to Guwahati, 4 hours away, with his mother's blessings. During this trip, he wondered who had nominated him for the conference. He had in mind a few possible suspects, but wasn't sure he wanted to think about it. All he had been told was the nomination letters were sought from experts and editors, and that several literary critics had recommended his powerful stories. And now here he was, sitting on a concrete bench at midnight, practicing to read a whole story in a language in which he had never spoken a full sentence. 3 weeks before Tejimola's birth, her mother Nimoli had eaten so many ripe orange peaches and swallowed so many slippery seeds that she was reminded of her childhood fear. She had strange dreams of becoming a large trunk tamarind, a lanky and weak papaya, a mango tree where ghosts resided. At night, she twitched to her bed. In the morning, when she told her husband, the wandering businessman Dhoniram Khaud, he chided her. He said her fears were baseless, but Numoli disagreed. The dreams were from the morning, and she was facing east, and she had woken up drenched in a sweat. She gave him a cup of tea made from dried bark of mature urgent tree. Aghuni, the tall and large-eyed midwife who would help with the delivery in 3 weeks' time, was sitting in the backyard. Later, she told Numoli there was nothing to be afraid of. It wasn't the childhood fear that was haunting her. Her dreams were anticipating the unborn baby, lush, leafy mango tree that she had transformed into in her dreams, standing all alone in a chrome yellow harvested paddy field, signaled a healthy baby. She said, never before had Aghuni been wrong in her interpretation of dreams, but this time she was. Numoli died, giving birth to Tejimola. While cutting the umbilical cord, Aghuni saw tiny light green buds on Numoli, which confused and scared her so much that she removed them hurriedly. But Numoli was also bleeding and gasping for breath, and Aghuni didn't know what to do to help her. By the time she had bathed the baby, those buds had started to mature into leaves. She plucked them one by one, like plucking the fine feathers off the body of a pigeon being prepared for cooking. Soon, Numoli's eyelids were covered with parrot green peach trees. Aguni plucked each one, bud by bud, leaf by leaf. She scrubbed the baby's skin with powdered lentils only after she had removed all the leaves from the mother's body. Aguni tried hard to make Numoli look like a normal corpse. She informed Dhoniram about the birth of his daughter. There was no one else in the labor room. That night, Aguni told Dhoniram Khaud that she would like to stay until the baby girl could take care of herself and was married off to a good boy who would be able to keep her by working in the rice fields or in the newly founded tea gardens of the British, although those were swarming with workers who spoke a different language from elsewhere. She loved the baby's dead mother like a sister, she said. Aguni didn't speak to him of her real fears. She was worried the baby would start sprouting leaves and die, like her mother did, though she didn't know how she would prevent that or how she would save the girl. Aguni wanted to linger. Howard built her a small but strong hut in his backyard. Aguni had no relatives to return to, so she accepted that hut as her own. But she used it only to keep her clothes and belongings and the ornaments her mother-in-law had given her on the deathbed. Her days were spent beside the baby's cradle and later her bed. They had named the baby Tejimola, but everyone affectionately called her Teji. By the time Howard married the second time, because the village elders pressed him to remarry so that the girl had a mothers carrying hands around her, Aguni had plucked different kinds of leaves of Teji's skin. She used varied paste, such as that of black-eyed beans or fresh turmeric. She didn't want to repeat her first haphazard methodless plucking. She thought it was the reason Numoli had died, for which she still blamed herself. As a result of Aguni's regular ministrations, which she masked as skincare so that the stepmother Romola wouldn't know what was going on, Tejimola had the most glowing skin in the whole village. She was dark-skinned like mature eels and catfishes, and shone even in a moonless night or at dusk when the day and the night met for a little while to chat. She also had the most beautiful oval eyes, like slim fishes with long, thick eyelashes, and only Aguni worried that they could turn into the vines of a bottle gourd. The worry probably killed her 2 weeks before the red-necked leaf green parrot sang to a middle-aged Howd, who was packing his bags for a trip around the world to sell his wonderful handicrafts and silk cloths. Aguni passed away in her sleep. The parrot sang, "When you see me, you frown into a lady your daughter has grown. When will you get her groomed from the town?" In shrill voice and accusatory troll, the parrot reminded Howd of his second wife, Romola, who was the most quarrelsome woman in the village, and treated Tejimola like a slave. He looked at the bird, sighed, and assured him that as soon as the steamer reached the chest of the Brahmaputra River, he would begin the search for a handsome groom for his only daughter. As was the case when Howd traveled, the night his boat floated towards the Bay of Bengal, Romola cooked delicious dishes for her 3 sons, but gave Tejimola only leftover rice with salt, made her sleep on the floor on a bamboo mat, and forced her to do the dishes, wash clothes, and even tether the cows when they returned home, a man's job. Tejimola was not saddened by this, for she loved the only person she could call Ma. The night Howd left, a small green bud sprouted on her finger. She used sandalwood paste to remove it as soon as she could. How much time do I have? Sanjeev had never thought himself a handsome man. During those postgraduate days in Guwahati University, it was Riti who had made him feel that way. She had accosted him after an open mic on campus and asked if he would share his mobile number and go out for coffee with her. When he said he didn't drink coffee, she called him every day for weeks, inviting him to have tea, thumbs up, Coca-Cola, Citra, cane juice, until he agreed. "Tea," he said, "I'll have tea with you." During what they would later call their first date, he was surprised that someone so attractive and interesting was drawn to him. They dated for 2 years and everything seemed just right. But he knew he had made a mistake when she took him home for the first time. A large 2-level building in one of the most expensive parts of the city. Their living room had an artificial stream, an aquarium that covered the length of the wall. The tables had expensive wooden and bronze statues. The marble floor was so clean that he felt his cheap 200 rupee chappals were permanently tainting it. Later, he told her, "You know, there is no future to this relationship. Don't you know my father is a farmer? He doesn't even own land. Some years he doesn't get to share crop because the Bangladeshi immigrants do it at cheaper rates. And your parents own one of the largest construction companies in Northeast India. Must every relationship have a future?" She asked, voice quivering. He paused. They were sitting on a wooden bench in the university campus. It was April, final exams were at least a month away. She was planning to go abroad for her doctoral studies or MPhil. He didn't know. She had never discussed it with him. The Krishnachura tree was in full bloom, its flowers reaching towards the blue spring skies like flames feeding on a large heap of straw. He asked, "What is the point then? I don't want to be anyone's time pass." Later, she had texted him. He was never a time pass, but a horrible way to brand their relationship. There was meaning in it, and unlike him, she saw a future for them. He read her text. He thought about the marble floor and his tattered chappals that had been stitched and repaired by the village cobbler. He replied that she was able to see that future because she was in higher ground. He still had a lot to build, a ladder, a staircase, God knows what else to reach her level. The marble floor and those tattered slippers, such a mismatch. At the conference luncheon, where the panelists were supposed to meet and bond with the moderator and plan the discussion, he felt like a misfit. The food laid on the table was colorful and looked delicious and fresh with a lot of vegetables, but he didn't know what to pick. The labels didn't mean anything to him. Paella, tortillas, fajitas, quesadilla, guacamole. For a second, he wanted to fish out his phone to Google those words, but he was shy. They had said lunch was going to Mexican, but he was looking forward to it, but he didn't know the names would be in Spanish too. He filled his plate with rice, bean, and vegetables, though he knew he was not quite right. It was not quite right. Something should be mixed with something, and he was doing it all wrong. Embarrassed, he sat in one corner. The rest of the panelists joined him after reading his name tag. Their hellos were cheerful enough, but he was relieved to meet John, the Naga writer. John knew Nagamese and Sanjeev spoke it fluently. Sanjeev hoped he could be friends with John and hang around with him. For a moment, he thought his regret at having accepted the invitation. What would happen if his story was accepted in some journal that he had never seen? He didn't know. He was a school teacher who didn't even get his salary regularly. He felt he was back in Riti's house, a large aquarium, marble floors, his tattered slippers. The moderator was a tall, well-built Punjabi man who introduced himself as an editor. He said his publishing house took a lot of pride in publishing writers from Northeast. Most of the writers present there, the Arunachali man, the Mizo woman, the Khasi girl, and a Nepali writer from Sikkim seemed to know the editor already. They laughed like longtime friends and occasionally referred to other writing conferences they had been to together. Sanjeev realized he was the only one among them who didn't write in English. He felt like he shouldn't be there like that classmate who came to school with long nails and smelly clothes and got bullied by everyone. So he tried to focus on his food instead. The rice was lime flavored, the vegetables were crunchy, the green paste was amazing. The editor said they must show the world what the real Northeastern story was. "I'm like a crusader for Northeastern stories from Northeast," he told Sanjeev. "So nice to meet you, young man. I'm really looking forward to your reading and finally finding out what you have written." Sanjeev thanked him, but was also surprised that the editor hadn't read his story yet. He would be the one nominating stories for the international anthology, John had said. "What's his name?" Sanjeev asked. John was surprised. He raised his voice. "Janina?" Sanjeev said he didn't impress him, John whispered, stabbing a piece of chicken with his fork. "If you impress him, you may get even a book contract." "I see," Sanjeev responded and thought about his mother, how proud she would be. Tejimola was surprised at her stepmom's mother's generosity. She had asked for a good cotton dress from her dead mother's shelf to wear to her best friend's wedding. Instead, Ramola brought out an expensive golden muga silk dress from Hualcochi. Tejimola hesitated, but Ramola smiled warmly and said, you don't have to wear those old designs, and you should start wearing a full-sleeved jacket blouse too. This is one convenient thing the British people brought with them. Instead of wrapping the riha, now you can wear a blouse under your dress. Here, I have a matching blouse. Tejimola hesitated. Still, Ma, are you sure? Oh, I'm growing old, my dear Teji. If the grown-up girl at the house doesn't wear my clothes, who will? Haven't you seen your brothers? God knows what kind of women they will bring home when they grow up. If this old lady gets a corner to rest and 2 meals a day after they bring home women to share their beds, I'll consider it enough. But then, who would wear my beautiful clothes? You must take up for your best friend's wedding. Will you be able to go alone? Yes, I can go alone. She looked at the Mekhala Sador hesitantly and added, it's a beautiful set. But Romola had plans, sinister plans. While packing the dress in a jute satchel, she had placed a smoldering wood and a large brown skin rat in the folds. The path to Tejimola's best friend was windy. It was the month of Phagun. The blood-red silk cotton flowers spread a carpet on the road. The long, slim petals looked like a sex worker's nails. Teji felt something moving in the jute satchel. She wanted to open it and check, but she was scared because her stepmother had warned her not to look inside before reaching the wedding. Romola had said the clothes would become dirty because it was so windy and dusty. Teji knew her anger. She had been overwhelmed at the sudden display of love and didn't want to disappoint her. She walked faster, resolving to check what was wrong only after reaching her friend's place, where she would take a bath and change. She didn't see the occasional wisp of smoke coming out from the jute satchel because she had tucked it between her arms and pressed it to her body. When she finally unwrapped the dress, Deji was horrified at seeing it partially burnt and rat-chewed. She had sat in a corner of the changing room and wept. Her stepmother would kill her. The dress was a wedding gift from an old aunt. Hoki, her best friend, tried to console her. Come on, Deji, you are not responsible for this. But how do I explain it, Hoki? You don't have to explain anything, just tell her the truth. Someone called her Hoki from the other room. It was time she bathed. The smell of flowers and different kinds of lentil paste that would be applied on her body during the ritual bath dispersed the sullenness of the room. Hoki opened a wooden box and took out a new part silk set that she had received as a gift and gave it to Tejimola. But Teji couldn't enjoy the wedding. A fear pulled at the tender strings of her heart like the sorrowful tone of a buffalo horn aerophone. She was sad. The teller of wonderful stories, her best friend with whom she had shared the news of her first period and first loves, was going away. She wondered when they would meet again and hoped to marry someone who lived in her best friend's new village. But the fears didn't subside like monsoon rivers, they overflowed, since she did not have answers for the burned silk dress. When the women sang the parting song and Hoki went to hug each person she was close to, Deji couldn't stop crying. Oh, lucky daughter of the house, with betel nuts in your hands, go say goodbye to your mother. With silk clothes in your hands, go touch the feet of your father. With worn out toys in your hands, go kiss the forehead of your little brother. With gold ornaments in her hands, go clasp the palms of your elder brother. With mischief twinkling in your eyes, go hug your closest girlfriends, whom you'll never meet again. Remember, a girl's life is just a string of ephemeral images formed by meeting nimbus clouds. Before leaving the courtyard of this house, at least turn back once. If you don't want the pots and pans of this house to follow you down the dusty road. Oh, lucky daughter of the house. Oh, lucky daughter of the house. Teji's stepmother didn't believe her. She caught hold of Teji by her long silky hair and slapped her. As punishment, she put the girl to grinding rice. Tejimola pleaded, said that she would do all her stepmother wanted, but Romola had planned Tejimola's death for a long time. And this was a golden opportunity. Howard wasn't around. At first, she smashed the girl's right hand with the grinder. When she cried, Ma, you crushed my right hand, Romola said, use your left, which she crushed in no time. And then she forced her to use her feet. When she cried, Ma, you smashed both my feet, please let me go, Romola asked her to use her head. She cracked her skull too with the stave. Romola buried Tejimola in the backyard. All these years, her flesh and blood had been waiting. As soon as Tejimola turned her back, the girl's flesh started to germinate and gradually turned into a gourd-bearing creeper. The soil sucked up her blood, drawing nourishment. The leaves, twigs, and the roots protected her soul, kept it intact. In a lonely backyard during windy afternoons, the plant would sing songs, and the fresh smell of gourds would spread. It was normal for songs to float in the slow, windy afternoons, thickened by the songs of cooing doves. The creeper's songs were soft. Anyone near enough to hear it would believe a woman was singing someplace far away. And the song goes like this. I've never sung it before in public. Hatune meri bi, huluni singi bi, gorina oria toy. Patkapura logote, mahiai khundile, ejimona hai moi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. One more time for Aruni. Yeah, so usually now I read bios and then bring people up, and I don't have a bio, so I feel like a chicken with its head cut off. So we're just gonna go ahead and bring up our moderator, our two readers, please, Puloma, Aruni, and Nur.
Wow, thank you guys so much for these beautiful readings. Another round of applause for the wonderful Aruni and Puloma for these fabulous selections. I was really in keeping with Paloma's, the title of her book. I was just literally swallowed up by them and felt like these were characters and stories that are just voracious and just how they take you in all these directions that you don't expect. So it was just a pleasure to read them. So thank you both. And thank you to the Asian American Writers Workshop for hosting us and for having, bringing together such a cool group of people. So I guess I wanted to start off with a broader question, but I also wanted to sort of give a sense of like how each of your collections, and particularly these stories, made me feel. Is like one of the biggest sort of, I guess, emotions that I felt when I was listening to you and when I was reading these first stories in your collection was the sense of how they each, as you're listening, they each transform and defy expectations the further, the deeper you go into a story. In Puloma, in your stories, we start off thinking that it's sort of a story of an adolescent, an immigrant girl, then it transforms into a dystopic narrative, then it transforms into a monster story, a supernatural story, and you have these sort of layers of genres and forms that sort of play with each other constantly. And this is true of a number of your stories in the collection. And Aruni, in this particular story, I felt like you sort of analyze, you have a very meta narrative of, you start with the idea of us sitting in, of everyone sitting in a panel and analyzing the idea of what is a story from a psalm, what is it supposed to be, and then you push us into a folk tale and a mythological tale. And you've already mentioned the actual source reference for this, but I wanted to ask both of you, as you use all these forms of reference and you have all these sort of genres and forms playing with each other, what were you primarily referring to and being inspired by as you developed your collections? Sure.
I think one of the reasons I have been thinking about what a proper story from Northeast India is because that's the question that I have had to answer or answer or respond to multiple times. When I started writing at a very young age and publishing when I was an undergraduate. I used to write. I'm a bilingual writer, writing both Assamese and English. But when I wrote in Assamese, I could write freely because nobody had any expectations attached with me. But when I started writing in English, there was so little information about the Northeastern region that everybody thought the story from Northeast should be a violent story about insurgency and resistance and horrible context-less violence, basically. And most of the time, I would send a retelling of a folk story because retelling folk story is a very big theme in modern Assamese literature. And this story there's been a novel about it, there's been short stories about it, poetry about it, films about it, numerous. So simply because the theme, not just because of the theme, the core idea, but also because it's a very appealing story. The girl who refuses to die, you can never kill her. She comes back to life eventually. So I thought that I need to negotiate this idea, but and I would go to conferences, I would read reviews. As an academic, I'm very interested in how reviews of minority writers, underrepresented literature is actually written. So I actually used to read every review, every scribble review, not only of my books when they came out, but also of how other writers. And most of the time, if somebody deviated from these expectations, I remember a review of Jahnavi Borua's book, where it said the book doesn't feel like as if it's an Indian literature. So, and then when people from Northeast say we don't want to belong to India, then you throw bombs at them, right? So that if you don't, there's so much this huge cerebral, emotional, political disconnect. It reflects in every aspect. So one of the reasons I wanted to explore this idea with this story, and of course this idea of using a meta stage is very common in postcolonial literature. Nadine Gordimer has done it to comment on apartheid in Livingstone's Companions. Ambai, the Tamil writer, has done it to comment on women's writing across history in Tamil literature for 2000 years in the story called Squirrel, and there are many other examples I can give you. So I thought I would align myself with this very long Indian post-colonial tradition of writing a political story, but also telling a very riveting story, engaging story, a dramatic story, where all of these questions can be asked in a very nerdy way, but also presented in a dramatic way. So that was the reason behind writing this story. I really had a lot of fun writing this story because I was uh, voicing a lot of my concerns through these characters, actually. Yes.
I love what you've been saying about like subverting the expectations of what's like certain literature from certain regions is like, whatever that means. And I also feel like in my own way, in a very different context, I have those same feelings about how like first generation diaspora literature is like it's the topics that the range of topics that you're like often are given attention, and I like always go for these like monster stories and these like supernatural things because I enjoy that, and I think that um writing all of these stories is just me reaching for the things that give me joy in writing, rather than feeling pressure to like represent an experience or you know, have some of my identity like there as like a something to be observed, and more as like something that comes out because I am who I am, but the story itself is about your vampire crush.
On that same note of vampire crush, one thing that both of you really bring out in your characters is physical desire, and sex and sexuality is sort of really prevalent through the stories. Like it sort of conveys a lot about these characters, I felt, in both your collections. And I'm wondering could you talk to me a little bit about how you use physical intimacy to build characterization in your collections?
Go ahead.
I think sex is really beautiful, and also like it reaches to like the just most essential and like animal parts of someone, and I think that a lot of my characters go to sex in it as a way to understand themselves, and but the ways that characters are intimate with themselves and with others can really show both the reader and also show the character themselves through the course of the story something about themselves that they're sort of figuring out as they go through this narrative.
I think for me, the reason is both personal and political. The political being that we have to remind ourselves that we are human. And I think desire, sexuality, sex makes us human. If two human beings who love each other cannot have fun with their bodies, what's the point of being human, right? That's one thing I always thought. The other thing is that, my mom actually was a novelist in Assamese language, and she wrote an autofiction and novel. And writing fiction from a politically charged place is dangerous, and now you can be killed and bombed. But here was writing a very frank novel about desire, sexuality, about the men she dated, and then her whole family stopped speaking to her after that. Yeah. So, but it really hurt my mom, and because she loved her family and she never wrote another novel again because she was always scared of the consequences. She wrote a novella later and short stories and op-eds, but a full-length novel of that level, and her first edition, when it sold out, she refused to go and get into a reprint because she was so embarrassed. Her colleagues in Cotton College, the premier college in Assam, slut shamed her. So, and it always stayed with me and bothered me. I'm talking about the 90s, of course. So I thought, maybe like I would insert a lot of sex in my own books. What should I-
My family's pretty conservative, especially in our relationship, and so being able to put like sex into my books has been a way for me to really like take control of my own desires and feel more comfortable with them by putting them on the page and not being embarrassed to read it in front of all of you.
That's something I appreciated in both your books as well, because while, we are seeing sort of the growth of sex and sexuality in fiction generally, you see this popularity, but I have seen there isn't enough of it from South Asian writers and from writers with similar backgrounds, and in my case, Muslim writers. And I feel like that's why I really appreciated both the collections, is because it was something that not just having sex for sex sake, which is also great, honestly, but like to have stories where the characters rely on it as a tool and as a source of sort of comfort and joy and sort of just to build their own narratives in that way and to have it push the story forward in some way, shape, or form.
I just want to also add that, during 90s, there was a lot of debate about sex and desire in Indian. For example, the lesbian movie Fire came out, which was banned. And as a reader, I remember 1997 high school got a small thing with the Booker Prize and all the obscenity tried. It went on for 20 years. We read about it a little bit here and there. But, I think these are things that subconsciously also that, makes a mark on you that, what is wrong with a beautiful novel? There's a sex scene there, and I think the case was that Indians don't have sex like this. How do you know? The 2 billion of us.
Yeah, that's a very great image. So also putting together, I feel like this is something that I often struggle with, is when you're telling stories that seem to be, disparate. They all sort of have their own distinctive concerns. Obviously, you have a thread that connects all your stories, and maybe it's the genres we've talked about or the themes we've addressed, the political, the folklore, all that. And I'm wondering, as you were working on your collections, how were you developing each story? Were you keeping a wider picture in mind, or did they sort of come to you organically and the threads came later on? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, what were the threads that connected all these stories, and how did you bring those out in the process of writing?
We can switch off. You go first.
Okay, all right, okay. Actually, I wrote the title, one of the stories here called His Father's Disease. Before I went to grad school, it was used as my sample for MFA. And based on the experience of one of my friend who was actually, the story is about the sexual relationship between an Indian army person and a local village queer guy who has been repressed. So there's a very abusive relationship between them. But it seems from the perspective of the mother. So, but I talked to some people who had similar experience. It really haunted me. But for some reason, I thought it was good enough for the MFA application I used. But then over the years, I wrote these stories. Actually, some of them were written as part of my thesis. It was called Resident Alien in Minnesota State University. But also, I don't think that I'm a short story writer. Actually, I find it very easy with the novel form. Even in these short stories, there are characters who are coming back. There are some stories which are where there are the same characters and they're two stories. And again, I was telling my publisher G, who is sitting here, that like I've already written some more stories with the same characters. Maybe if it sells out, we can have a third edition, which will be fatter and fatter. So aggressively fatter book, but that's me because I'm actually at heart a novelist, probably. So I find it difficult to say things in through short stories, but I always challenge myself to write one.
There's a guy named Mike in your collection who keeps showing up, and I found him very annoying. He's a great character. He's a great character, but I was like, oh no, Mike is back. So
Mike is like the grad guy who was during the pandemic telling us how to use cast iron when our family had been using it for 19 years.
and he's dating an Indian girl throughout, and he's got all these things.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike is back.
Is this the Aruni cinematic universe?
It feels like the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
I actually love writing short stories. And I also like writing speculative short stories because I think people's reaction to reading a speculative short story is to say, oh, but you could expand the world and it could be a novel. And then I love to not do that. I only have to know what serves the story and the characters for the period that we're with them. And I really enjoy these little snapshots. And I wrote some of these before grad school, some of them during grad school, and then some of them after. And I feel like the thread that ties them together is just me in my 20s and all of the things that I was obsessed with, all the things that I was thinking about, and all the emotions I was having, which came together and like naturally connected these stories. And I think that happens a lot if you write a lot of stories like within a certain period. They begin to be connected just by as a reflection of your psyche. And also, I don't know, there's a lot of like eating and swallowing and in all sorts of ways, and so mouth kind of felt like the tie.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've noticed about your stories, Puloma, is that you sort of, again, as I mentioned earlier, you have a sort of a genre that you're following, whether it's dystopic, or I think in your second story you have a character who's sort of a Indian diaspora girl coming back to Calcutta and with her mother's after her mother's death. But in all those stories that sort of follow a certain, I guess, an expectation of the reader that this is going to be a story about X or Y, you put in what is, at least in most of the stories in the collection, I felt you put in what is a really weird, odd twist. And it's something that sort of comes out of, like the girl eating the rat, or it comes out of left field. And then and in the Calcutta story, it's her seeing her mother, or wondering what she's seeing, of this arm that's sort of moving through a crowd, or this sort of ghostly figure that she seems to keep noticing. So I'm wondering, as you kept writing these stories and sort of kept working into the sort of the preoccupations that you have, or the genres that you are obsessed with or really into, how did you pull out that strange twist, that strange thing that sort of really, I guess, came out of left field? How did you reach that point in your writing?
For that particular story, that is actually like from an actual like folktale scary story that I thought I didn't make up the arm thing. But for most of it, it's like my body does the plot twist in my brain, kind of. I don't really like think like I'm gonna put something really weird in here. I think I'm just really weird, and so like okay, they're walking into this scene and like this is happening, and then it's kind of like a knee jerk of like rip open their skin. I don't know. Like, I watch a lot of horror, and I'm really like invested in that genre. So I think all of those things are like rooting around in my brain.
I love the body horror in there because it made me think sometimes of David Cronenberg films and like all
I
these
love
weird,
David
yeah,
Cronenberg.
yeah. It was great. Aruni, to sort of to look at the idea of like meta narratives a little bit more. There's one story in the collection which is about Before the Bullet, I believe. Yeah, that's the title, and in that you basically telegraph what's going to happen to this Assamese student who's come back from the US to his village, And you tell us basically from the very beginning, before he gets shot, this is what's happening. You have this sort of playing around with time. You go back 2 years, you go back an hour before he gets shot. So you sort of tell us, you warn the reader, this is what's going to happen at the hands of this Indian soldier. And I'm wondering, could you talk a little bit about how you, again, decided to twist around time in that way? What was your inspiration for doing something like that in a story like that?
It was actually written as an experiment because I wanted to exactly do a twist around time and play around with temporality. I had read Thomas Sowell's actually Bullet in the Brain, and then I said I really loved it, and my advisor said you should write a story in response to that in that style. So I took it up as a challenge. Usually I don't like prompts, by the way. So even though I give my students a lot of prompts, but I don't like people. So that came up and he said, that's really great. You should put it in your thesis. That's how it happened. But I thought that, the pathos could be much more powerful if the readers already knew that this guy was going to die and everybody's preparing for his arrival, cooking, they're talking about it, about the political situation.
Yeah.
But I also have spoken to many journalists who covered the insurgency in the 90s, especially the counterinsurgency operations in Assam. And this was very common. They needed bodies to show that the army was doing their job. So they would actually kill innocent people. And there have been many more books about it now recently. But in the time when I was growing up, this is common knowledge. And we would talk to people, and many people in my own village were tortured, killed, my friends. We just, it was so common in the air, that I just knew this was happening. But then now, people have written books about it. Kishore Bhattacharya has written a book about it, actually, which is a journalism professor at Jindal Global University. And many other people have written. But I didn't need to read those nonfiction books because it was my lived experience, kind of. Yeah. So I wanted to write all of that. And I think I cannot stop thinking about human rights and storytelling, how they intersect. So hence my stories also end up sort of as a sponge, taking up a lot of these political events and trying to comment on them. Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing up all the sort of connecting your story to the political, even though your first story resists that. You say, why should I have to write? What you have a character being asked, why didn't you write about the violent
Yeah.
insurgency? What is and the writer at the heart of that story is basically like, why should I? But also the folk tale, as you mentioned at the end of it, at the center of it is about a violent insurgency. So my question to you is, why don't you write about violent insurgencies? But ultimately, I guess what sort of drew me to both your characters, and I saw this thread in so many, and I guess it's true for a lot of people who write, is characters who feel like outsiders, characters who are lonely at heart, who are sort of, and in your cases, there's one story, Puloma, in your collection that has you have a character who watches her town empty out and she chooses to stay, and she ultimately is raising this sort of wolf-like monster creature who becomes her main companion. And this character is a very lonely person who just sort of is wanting to hold on to this space within their house. And then in Aruni, your story, which is the title story of the collection, The Way You Want to Be Loved, you have a character who almost lets heartbreak push away someone who could really love this person the way they desire. And these are characters who push away others, who are sort of resisting in some way, shape, or form. They resist joy before inviting it into their lives. And I'm wondering what sort of aspects of how were these characteristics, in what way were you drawn towards characteristics like this? Like, what made you sort of write characters that are, so much like the way I've described?
I think, as you said, this is probably true for a lot of writers, but there's like a period in my life where I experienced a lot of loneliness, and I think that there is a part of misery that loves the misery, that the misery is comfortable, and it's actually scary to admit and embarrassing to admit that you are not happy and then seek out joy. And I think a lot of the characters are really stuck in their own miseries because of fear and embarrassment and like not knowing how to reach out, and eventually, at least in my stories, they wind up reaching out to something otherworldly that really like kind of harms them, but they sort of welcome that harm. And I feel like I lost my train of thought. You asked about loneliness.
Yes.
And
I'm listening. Loneliness and what sort of pulled you towards characters who are like lonely.
that's the other thing I was going to say, is that it's like also I think and I was resisting this, but then I'm also going to do it. And growing up, like first generation, you have a feeling of unbelonging no matter where you go. I don't think that like I feel a full belonging in this country, and I certainly don't feel really much belonging in the country that I'm from. And so I think that like straddling puts you in like a singular place where you feel not understood and you feel a lack of connection no matter where you reach for it. And I think that is also something that the characters experience, and I really wanted to write about that, or maybe I couldn't help but write about that.
I think the diasporic life is generally very lonely unless you're living in a big city and you're very intentional about creating community. A few months ago, my partner and I drove from Athens to Tennessee. What city it was? Louisville, I think. And then we didn't see a single person on the road. There are houses, cars outside, and he was like, "Where are all the people?" But that is one example. But also, when you come to a small town, university town in the US, and you walk out, let's go for a walk. There's no one on the road. Like people are already driving. And then there's this common meme in Instagram where actually it's a dialogue from his very famous film, I think, Sholay probably. And and when he say, "Kahan gaye gaon walo?" Right? Where are all the villagers? Where are all the people? And it's true. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the way you want me love the title story was inspired actually by some really horrible, brutal experiences that many people I know told me about. I have friends who are queer activists in Delhi, and before Article 377 was actually removed or repealed, the police used to actually take advantage of that by arresting people who are even sitting together, and accuse them of obscenity and torture them, sexually harass them, extort money. And when I heard that, I was very, very heartbroken because it had led to some disastrous consequences, as you see in the story. Because people who are needed in crucial times and crucial incidents in your families, they're locked up, and then you have to go through a legal quagmire, right? As it is. So it really broke my heart when I heard a similar story like that. And then that's why actually I wrote. But I think in general, I think as one of my favorite writers, Faulkner says, the conflict of the human heart is the one that creates good stories, right? Yeah. I mean, it is. You never go to watch a very sad film and come back and say, "I wasted my time," right? Even though you're crying.
Do we have time for questions? I think yes. Okay, so thank you both so much. I've got a follow-up questions, but I want to give the audience a chance to also ask their own questions. Sure, you want to? Yeah.
You guys are both amazing. I love how your styles, how there's definitely like a continuity, but you're both such distinct voices. And also I'm just also grew up in India, so I'm just super excited right now. I was wondering, and I know this is a hard one to sort of rapid fire, but I'm curious about, you mentioned Faulkner, and I'm just curious about what other writers you sort of see your work as being in conversation with, or like that have sort of informed yours. Or not just writers, also, if you like, as a fellow like Desi Goth? Like, I'm curious about just what all the art, I guess, that inspired you for both of you, really.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that great question. I love talking about this question. I love answering this question. Yeah, I mentioned Indira Goswami was a very well-known Assamese writer. I grew up reading her novels. She wrote a lot of autofiction, but one of the things that I learned from her was actually how to use metaphors and how to extend the metaphor. If you read her prose, it's very, very elastic and durable. Another writer who I grew up reading in Bengali as well. I read fluently Bengali, and there are Bengali books in my house, always in the house. So among many, many Bengali and Bangladeshi writers, Bengali from India as well as Bangladesh, I actually love this writer called Asha Pune Devi, who is incredible in character creation and use of suspense. And she was a writer who wrote about 179 novels and 3,000 short stories approximately, many, many essays. But she only lived in her home. She was a housewife, and she used to clean, feed everybody, shut the kitchen. At night, she used to write one short story, two short story, and 70 years of writing career. And she was one of the foremost writers, wrote mostly women and all kinds of women, very interesting. So, but what she was amazing at is that to create drama in this space, to create suspense, and most importantly, with just one line, she knew how to establish and make a character alive. So every time I'm not able to create a character, I read her work actually, original Bangla. And I love Narine Gordimer, who actually I encountered when I was in college, because I was writing from a space where sovereignty, politics are so important. I thought, Indian English writers are not writing about these things most of the time. For whatever reason, we can have a conference about that. Another program for Asian American Writers Workshop. But I thought the Indian writers in the regional languages, in Bengali, in Malayalam, is so political, getting into trouble all the time, everywhere, and but I didn't see an English writers writing about that, except Arundhati Roy, probably, and a few others. So I found actually my community, or so to say, in Nadine Gordimer or Thiongo, in Gugiwa Thiongo, these writers who gave me a permission that, you can write about state violence, because other writers who are famous and widely read from India didn't write about those things. Maybe it didn't matter to them, maybe it was not the experience, whatever, or didn't want to get into trouble. But those are some of the writers I read. There's a long list. Marquez is one of those writers who helped me understand that, the folk tales that I grew up with, that in my village are important. They're worthy of literature. And of course, I have to mention Toni Morrison. Her work, Song of Solomon, I think saved my life. I read Song of Solomon and decided to stick with English literature. I was about to go back to Assam from Delhi because I didn't want to study literature. But I read Song of Solomon and decided if studying literature means reading books like Song of Solomon, I'm going to do it.
Okay, I'm gonna go somewhere completely different. I feel really influenced by women short story writers, especially ones who go into freaky spaces. Like Mariana Enriquez is one of my favorite authors, and Yoko Ogawa, Laura Vandenberg. And I really enjoy Haruki Murakami's short stories. And as far as other media, I watch a lot of film and TV that is very horror. And I really enjoy body horror. I feel like The Neon Demon made which is a flawed movie, but made a big impression on me as far as the imagery goes. I really like contemporary horror films like your Hereditaries and The Witch, and the Cronenberg-esque disgusting horror, like this film The Void. And also if The Substance just came out, banger, incredible, nasty, I love that stuff. Oh, and I really also just like classic supernatural stuff. I'm a big Anne Rice fan. I love vampires and ghosts and werewolves and all of that stuff.
Any other questions?
We had every question.
Hi all, I just want to say quickly that how incredible you guys are. I do have a question specifically for you, Aruni. I was wondering, I've just been thinking about your mom and about, and her incredible work, and it makes me sad to know that she didn't get to reprint or she decided not to, and thinking about how people have, slut shamed her. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm wondering, is there any way to access her work online? Like, is there an archive or something like that where we can read some of her work?
Thank you so much. I'm translating her novel. And you can read about her in very briefly in the book called Provincials, Postcards from the Peripheries by Dr. Shumana Roy, which was published this year in the Yale University Press. So I happened to share some pages and she was very moved. So she said, can I talk about a book that is not published in English? I mean, she just didn't say that, she just wanted to write about it, even though it was not published. So like, do you have your permission to write about this in my essay? In my essay collection. So you can read a little bit about her because I shared some of the translated pages with her. So, but yes, I hope I'll hopefully finish this novel, translating this novel, and one day see the light of the day and publish it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful question. My favorite question.
Oh, of course.
Hi, so I have a question for both of you. Paloma, not to put you on the spot, but we actually took a college class together 10 years ago. Called 800 Words. And I remember you to this day, so that's what's here. I saw your name in the email and I was like, I have to go see Paloma. And I remember you to this day because I remember in the last class, you asked our professor, is it actually practical to be a writer? And he was like, why would you ask that question? And you said, because being a writer is like being a movie star. Only a few people get to make it. And he said, well, there's a big difference between being a movie star and being an actor because you love acting. And being a writer because you love writing. And so it's just so amazing to see you here, like fully expressing. I didn't want to ask, like, you both have kind of touched on what gives you meaning as a writer and what gives you a sense of purpose as a writer in different ways, whether it's telling stories that you've heard from people around you and sharing those, or representing your mother's experience, or touching into these things that are like authentically your obsessions. And so I'm just curious, what gives you a sense of purpose as a writer now? And how do you think your past self 10 years ago would feel about where you are as a writer today?
I'm actually so moved by that. I like almost feel like I'm gonna cry. Like I can't like. I think like. Oh my god, am I really gonna cry? I feel like. Wow, this never happened to me before. I think like I really thought that there had to be like a purpose to be a writer, and you had to like achieve something in a way. And I think I think like it's opened for me that I don't have to write with purpose. I can write because I love to do it, and then like hope that someone enjoys reading it. And I think that I was really like so unhappy in that period of my life. And like I'm so happy now. And I feel really talented. Sorry. It's good.
Okay, I'm going to let Puloma have a minute. If you want, you can always add, okay? Yes, thank you. That is a beautiful question. I think that question comes up again and again. I also used to obsess over conventional success, but I realized that I really need to create a life where I can wake up and just write even if the books conventionally doesn't become successful. And I was telling a friend of mine a few days ago, and I say this when things come up. Uh, I wanted to be published traditionally, but at the same time, I have written 5 to 7 novels that went nowhere. I did all the right things. I went to workshops. I hired professional editors to get it edited. They were just not good. That's all. And I spent years and years writing them. And I spent thinking this is the book that will eventually find me an agent. This is the book that will eventually get me X, fellowship or big best-selling author. But what I realized is that I love writing. That is why I write. Actually, if I wake up in the morning and don't write, that is not the day you should talk to me because I'm so cranky and I'm mean and horrible and crabby. I'm this old horrible person because I've not been able to write. So of course, when I'm traveling, things doesn't really happen. But even when I'm traveling, I find because it's my meditative space and I don't want anybody to take it away. And if nobody read me, if nobody published me, I have realized now at the grand old age of 39 that this is what I will do. And it doesn't matter. I'll push to get that, conventional success. I would love that. Who doesn't want a big billboard in Times Square and NYT, a bestseller? But will it make me happy or will writing a novel every day make me happy? Is actually I found the answer to that question, to quote a line from Amitabh Ghosh's Shadow Lines, the final redemptive truth.
Yeah, I also feel that I wanted when I was younger, I wanted some sort of achievement like that. And I tried for all these fellowships as well. And those things are competitive, and to gauge, to allow those things to determine whether you think you deserve to write and do this thing that is, I think, one of the only things that consistently has made me happy forever is kind of besides the point. And I feel like I also opened up as a writer when I stopped trying to thinking of myself as a writer TM, as that being an identity. It is something I enjoy doing and something I will keep doing, and not something that I need to become.
Can I just add one line? Yeah, thank you. Puloma, beautiful. That's I inhabit 2 literary spaces. One is the Assamese literary space and the English literary space. Assamese literary space, unlike the Bangla or Malayalam or Tamil or Hindi space, it's a very small space. So there are no literary agents. The publishers, I have published 2 books in Assamese. I've never seen a royalty check. And I've never seen a contract. Yes, it was on WhatsApp. Do you want to, would you let us publish your work? Yes. I know people who have written 30 books. They have never seen an advance check, a royalty check. They sometimes have to go and buy their own books, But why do they write? Because they love to write. And I've seen hundreds of people over my life in Assam, in other smaller literary spaces, who do this because they believe that somebody will read their work and like it. That's why. When there's so much not available there, why am I to complain when I have so much more and I have worked hard for it? But at the same time, these people are there just doing it for the love of it. I want to do it for the love of it as well. That's my inspiration.
One question.
Hi, thank you for reading the parts of your book. They've been very interesting and fascinating to listen to. I was just wondering if you both could talk a little bit about how you have come up with the titles of both the books, because they are anthologies, and I'm just curious to know what brings a collection of different stories and together to give a title such as the one that you guys have given your books.
Sure. It's my publisher's choice. I credit G. The title is a title of a story. So this book was originally published as His Father's Disease in India by Context. Then it was published in UK as His Father's Disease. It's coming out in Polish. I don't know what will be the title, but probably His Father's Disease. But when this book came out, there are three extra short stories than the Indian and the British edition. So G and I were, my publisher was talking about this, and G said there should be a new title. And actually, I'm one of those authors who actually are not really. I don't know what Kim Thoi thinks about me, who's my editor, but I actually don't really. These are things that don't matter to me. Like some people are very, 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 rigid about this is what my title would be, But G suggested two, I think, and I liked one of them, and I said, go ahead. And honestly, I should overthink these things. I don't think about this. As long as if G thinks calling the book the way you want to be loved will sell it, let him sell it. It's not worth it to debate it, or I don't like it, I don't dislike it, but actually I liked it this time. Yeah, so it really like doesn't matter to me actually. You can't call it like I don't know sex and Delhi. I'll be fine with it.
I'm fine.
Yeah, next book. Yeah, next book. Thank you for the title of the next book.
Sex and go.
I generally you title a short story collection after one of the titles of one of the stories, but all of my titles, I'm like a really title minimalist. So like none of my they're all very, and the stories are kind of different, so they're all very specific, and none of the titles feel like they could represent the whole collection. Like something like The Fig Tree or like Persimmons. It's like they're kind of random.
One of your stories is just Kate.
It's just the letter. It's the letter K. So I had to really think about like, and I thought about this before I even got an agent. I was trying to like present my work as a collection. So I had to think to myself like what actually tied all of these together, and it was eating consumption, and I went back and forth between mouth and feast. And then I thought, well, not all of it is like strictly eating. Some of it is like sexual. So I felt like mouth was like more appropriate. That's why I landed on that.
Mount. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Right.
One more time for your readings. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the writers and everyone. When you can.